All who agree that Cynthia Bailey looks absolutely amazing, say aye.
Aye.
It got Akko Taco on Watch What Happens Live with both Cynthia Bailey and Jeff Lewis. You guys, this was an awesome interview, but it just seemed a little uncomfortable at times. You see how Jeff Lewis really gets under Andy's skin. Okay, so first and foremost, the question is posed by Jody from St. Louis. Shout out to Jody, because Jody asked a really good question. And her question was to Jeff Lewis: which of these three ex-housewives do you think is the most thirstiest to get back on the show? She said Vicki Gunvalson, Dorinda Medley, or Jill Zarin. And you know, he tried to be politically correct, which we already know that ain't Jeff Lewis. Jeff Lewis tells it how it is. And so his response initially was, well, you know, I'm friends with all of these women. But then he was like, but Jill would really love to be back on the show. Oop, oop. I said, oh, got him. I didn't know if he was going to answer at first, because he is, you know, he talks about, you know, how he's close with them. You see them at, you know, out to eat at different restaurants. They come on to his show that he has on XM radio. You know, they are truly friends. And so he answers the question, and this is where everything kind of begins. They both begin to go back and forth with Andy about how Jill is a really good person. She's a really good housewife. She deserves to be back on the show, and it's making Andy uncomfortable, you know? So, you know, you have both of them now. Both of the people that you're interviewing are now, you know, double teaming on you. And it's like, as someone who also in the past, I was a radio personality, would have to facilitate, you know, different radio interviews, and you have to take control of the interview. And at that point, he lost control of the interview. So, you know, that is already a little, you know, jarring. Plus, we're live, okay? We are live. You can't, you know, cut, splice, dice, none of that. So this is a you know, real situation happening on live TV, and how you react is going to be everything. People are not going to pay attention to what was done prior to. They're going to pay attention to what the reaction is. So, you know, Andy is like, you know, I don't disagree. I believe she is a great person. She is an awesome person. I love her too. At the end of the day, it's not up to Andy anymore. Cynthia Bailey jumps in and makes an interesting comment that she stayed in Jill Zarin's apartment when she was in New York. I thought that was very interesting too. She also mentioned, well, Andy brought it, but she mentioned that she was going to bring it up, that Jill Zarin called Cynthia to have Cynthia reach out to Andy to have Andy get Jill her job back. Now, to me, this goes directly to the question from shout out to Jody from St. Louis. She asked which one is the thirstiest of them all. And I mean, Jeff Lewis, just based off of that story right there, is right. It definitely is Jill Zarin. Now, sidebar, don't think Vicki Gunvalson and Dorinda Medley ain't too far behind. Okay, let's call facts, because we know Vicki is very, very parched, and so is Dorinda. So anyways, so then they're still talking about Jill, and then Cynthia Bailey said something very interesting. She was interrupted a lot, especially with Jeff Lewis. Cynthia Bailey mentioned to Andy, well, isn't she going to be on a show anyway on Bravo that's going to be coming out soon? I'm like, I ain't hear about her being on any show. So I feel like Cynthia just dropped some nuggets that we weren't even expecting or even knew about. So I'll have to do some research and see what show. But anyway, Jeff Lewis interrupts and says, I think you should have Kelly Dodd back on the show. Now, the way Andy reacted, in my mind, to me, it felt like, look, we didn't have this conversation behind closed doors about the situation with Kelly Dodd. Why are you bringing this up on international TV? Why? We had already talked about this, Jeff. That's the face that he gave him. In my mind, I just feel like they already had this discussion. So Andy doesn't really touch that with a 10-foot pole, but the audience definitely reacts, which prompts Jeff to be like, oh, excuse me. Right, excuse you. This is not your show. Just calm down. He's asking a lot of questions, you know, which we expect that from him because he has his own platform, but you're now on the other end of that. So just be that. Getting back on track, this leads Andy to ask the question, well, is there anything else you want to get off your chest? Now, why did you say that, Andy? Because you already right now don't have control of the interview. And now, you know, they've word vomited, you know, in excess, regarding their love and just doting on Jill Zarin, which has already made him quite uncomfortable. Now you're giving them even more of an opportunity to say more. But I appreciate Andy Cohen because he didn't back down from questions that could make him feel more uncomfortable. Instead, he plowed through them. Had he not asked that question, we wouldn't have gotten the gold that we received from this interview. So, getting into this part here, he asks, is there anything else you'd like to get off your chest? Cynthia Bailey is attempting to, think out loud and answer this question. You know how you kind of start a sentence, stop a sentence, start a sentence, stop a sentence, and it's because you're trying to get your thoughts together. She's doing that, and Jeff just interrupts her and smugly says, would you go back to the Housewives? Well, you wouldn't go back to the Housewives because you have an acting career now. Very smug and very sarcastic. Of course, Cynthia, not picking up on it, goes ahead and answers her favorite answers. I never say never, which Andy Cohen co-signs. And then Andy Cohen gets on his soapbox. And I feel like that was it. Like, Andy Cohen has had it up to here with Jeff Lewis. You've said too much. Basically, he says, look, Cynthia Bailey and I, we had this discussion. Matter of fact, Cynthia Bailey was Cynthia Bailey before she came to the Housewives. So Cynthia Bailey was good before, and she gonna be just fine afterward. And check that. Clearly, to me, he feels the impact of the statements Jeff Lewis is making, the questions Jeff Lewis is asking. Andy Cohen had Cynthia's back at that moment, even when Cynthia didn't even understand what was going on. I feel like she totally missed all the shade in that. But that's okay, boo-boo, because Andy Cohen was like, she was Cynthia Bailey before and she's going to be Cynthia Bailey after, with a high five. Yes, I was here for that moment. Now, this is the part that, gets under Jeff Lewis' skin, because Andy Cohen says she walks in gratitude. He must have said that at least 3-4 times. And the last time he said it, he was directly talking to Jeff Lewis. And Jeff Lewis said, do you think I don't walk in gratitude? And here we go. And Andy Cohen was like, debatable. Jeff Lewis is like defending himself, vehemently defending himself. Like, how could you say I'm ungrateful when I said I was grateful the moment I walked in here today? Andy Cohen said, I'm just being playful, which, Andy Cohen, you kind of weren't. You've regained control of the interview. And now Jeff Lewis is in his feeling. Now, Jeff Lewis and Andy Cohen are kind of going back and forth. And, Cynthia Bailey, sitting, of course, next to Jeff Lewis, she feels it. And she felt the need to put her hand on his knee. And that is the most endearing, motherly sign, like, hey, it's okay. Okay, she finally felt, oh, it's a little thick in the air right now. Let me pay attention, because she's been in La La Land this whole time. Let's face it, she's been in La La Land. She puts her hand ever so slightly on his knee. The statements that they say, again, all on live TV, I don't know. It's just very weird. Jeff Lewis said, I would kill for you. And then Andy Cohen says it back, well, I would kill for you. I am very confused by that statement. And people are like, I love you so much, I'd kill for you. But, I don't joke like that. And that's not funny. I watch too many murder mysteries, so that to me just really stuck out, and it shows how close they are. But I believe they know where each other's bones are buried. And it's like, that was like, oh, check me, I'll check you too. What's up? I believe it's a little bit of that also in there. What is going on with Jeff Lewis and Andy Cohen? Okay, so getting back to this, Jeff Lewis is in his feelings and Cynthia Bailey takes over. So she's going back onto her soapbox with her leaving the Real Housewives franchise. But then here comes Jeff Lewis saying, oh, I was there for 11 years too. I could have made the 12, but I got fired. Cynthia Bailey is just talking and talking and talking. And Andy Cohen isn't listening to a word she is saying. He is like, wait a minute. I didn't fire you. He then says, sweetie. So when someone says sweetie, honey, that's like a wait a minute. Okay, that's a hold up right there. He said, I was not in charge of programming during that time. So he's like, look, you can't say that because that's not true. I wasn't even part of programming. But Jeff Lewis, of course, being Jeff Lewis, says, you know what? 6 people voted against me. You were one of them, but whatever. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And to me, this was Jeff Lewis holding on to this for however long it's been since, the show has been over. The show was a great success. And some shows do need to move on. And he's trying to call Andy out for something that Andy Cohen is like, I didn't have anything to do with that. But Jeff Lewis just has to make his point. And, this ticks off Andy Cohen to the point where he's like, I could be home with my daughter. He wants to kirk out so bad, but has maintained his composure. He's able to finish out this interview and not make a complete butt of himself because he was going left. He was going left. Had Jeff Lewis said one more thing, it was going left. And you can see at the very end, you guys go back and watch this. Please, I'm gonna put the link down in the description. When you go back and watch this, as they're playing the outro shots, you can see Andy Cohen and he's like shaking his head. Like he's like, oh my gosh, this was so stupid. It was stupid for him, but it was good for us. Hello. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. This video is going to last way longer than I anticipated, but there were so many, pieces and nooks and crannies. We had to go through each and every single one of them. Anyway, I have to know so many things. Number one, who do you think is the thirstiest ex-housewife out of
Vicky, Dorinda, or Jill?
Do you think Andy and Jeff are like beefing? There's some underlying tension going on there. And it seemed to have come out on national TV. Number three, do you think it was right for Jeff Lewis to bring up saying he voted against him? Honestly, is rumor mill. It's fodder. And so for him to bring that up, I know that made Andy feel some type of way because now you're also airing dirty laundry. I do think that was right for Jeff Lewis to do that. Again, it was great for us. But how do you think this makes Andy feel? Anyway, let me know down in the comments. Peace.